Hangry works too, Betsy.
We are angry.
That's went on in my mind, but I have now printed out the agenda so I can actually read people's titles and names. I learned fast. So I'm going to hand it over to Wendy and Jacob. And as Bailey noted in the chat, we are recording again, so just be aware of that.
Well, good morning, everybody. And okay, there we are. Good morning. So a couple of years ago, we were asked by the OLA Education Committee to put together a workshop for the October annual conference. And they came to us and they said, we'd like you to do a program on how to handle angry customers. So at the time, we weren't sure if we should be, flattered or insulted, but we realized it was to be flattering, and we grabbed it and went. And we think it's because we do a lot of events with big numbers, such as Polar Express, and deal with a lot of people who in the past have been angry. So we will not have, as we normally do, fun t-shirts and music and candy. So we do encourage you to grab your own candy, as Jacob's doing, and treat yourself, because we are a big fan of free prizes in our programs and in our events. So we'll talk about that later. So
eat your hearts out, everybody. It's dark chocolate peanut butter. So what we're going to do now is we're actually going to go ahead and share our screen so you can see our PowerPoint.
hopefully it works.
It should work.
Go this
Alrighty. Show and begin it.
All right. So this is sort of how to handle angry customers, part 2, COVID version.
So some of you we actually did this program, like Wendy said, probably 2 years ago at the annual meeting in October. And so some of you may have seen this already. However, we did kind of change it up, and there are definitely some new things, some kind of things that we twisted around to really kind of talk about COVID. So if you've seen this presentation before, you will definitely see something new. And for those of you who haven't seen it yet, hopefully you will learn a lot, because as it says, there are top 10 how to angry customers. And of course, we have lots of different layers in this.
So we want to just explain where we get our ideas, because we just broke this down to a simple top 10 list. Jacob and I have had the good fortune to go to Disney Institute in Florida several times. Big fan of Starbucks. We do a lot of reading, Seth Godin, Good to Great. We didn't put lots of books up here, but we did put these two, The Power of Moments, and Creating Magical Moments. If you haven't read that book, I strongly encourage it. We'll talk about that later. And then just some of this is our own crazy adventures that we've done at our 3 museums and tips that we've learned.
On top of all of that, we have a whole nother layer that we have to do. So Wendy and I have spent a lot of time, and our staff has spent a lot of time trying engineering experiences and engineering lots of different ways for people to experience our museum. But we have a whole nother layer that we have to talk about, which are the state and federal guidelines according to mask wearing and social distancing and all the other things that we have to deal with COVID. So inside these 10 tips that we're going to tell you, there are layers in them. So definitely lots to talk about.
We started looking at our customers. These are our customers during the pandemic, and we broke them into 3 groups. So we sort of have our happy mask wearers, people who follow the rules and come to the museum and pretty much happy. Then we have our unhappy mask wearers, and the 3rd group is the people just who aren't coming out. So just so we're comparing apples to apples, we're really talking about people who come to your sites right now. We're not talking about the unhappy mask wearers, because they're probably not coming. We have had some at outdoor events who have come and been told they have to wear masks and got mad and left. So we're just not really going to talk about them. And we're not talking about the ones that are afraid to go out, because that's a whole other subject. We've done a lot of, everybody's doing online content. We've done a lot of that. That's a whole subject in itself. So we're just talking about the people who are coming to our museums. And we're going to give you our first tip. Don't make them angry. Okay, it sounds really silly, but the truth is the way to handle angry customers is not to make them angry. So simple, but there's really a lot of thought behind that. And why do they get angry? Why do people get angry? It's really simple. It's because their experience did not match their expectation. Expectation is a very important word. Their assumptions about you, what they expect to see, what they've read about, what they've heard about. That's really important. So when people get angry, there's a failure somewhere. Could be something that we've done at the museum, could be something in their life, could be something we don't have control over, COVID, but they're mad because there's a failure somewhere. You might not be able to handle all the situations that lead to failure, but there are a lot of them that you can control.
So when I talked about layers in the beginning, we were talking about pre-COVID. So the first thing we're talking about is the pre-COVID expectations. And no matter what, anybody who comes to your site will have already preconceived notions about you, no matter what. They have what we call, and write this down, this is very important, what we call an emotional bank account. And what that bank account is, just like a regular bank account, they already have some kind of idea, some kind of deposit already about you. And that could be positive or that could be negative. So what you want to do is you want to swing everything to the positive. Now, again, when I say that people are interacting and talking about you before, that could be word of mouth, that could be your marketing, that could be your Facebook, that could be the way you answer your phone. So again, those preconceived notions start before someone even actually physically visits the site. So in that emotional bank account, when somebody is going through your museum or going through your site, things that are positive will deposit into that bank account. Things that are negative will withdraw from that emotional bank account. So things are not working. Someone is not nice to them. Could be lots of different reasons that could be negative. Things that could be positive. They really loved an exhibit. They really loved an interpreter. It could be any of those things that make it positive. By the end of their visit, what you're trying to do is to have as many positive deposits and as many, or the least amount of negative withdrawals to have that very high emotional bank account. So when people come, their regular visitor expectations are that you will fulfill the exact brand image that you have portrayed in all of your literature and marketing, that you will not fail to deliver on those promises that you have made, that in what you say in your literature and in your communication is what exactly and actually what you mean, and last but not least, is that there are no gaps between what you say the experience is and what really is, because what happens next is an expectation versus reality. And I love this picture because it is a perfect example of what you want to expect, and then sometimes reality sets in. Sometimes that happens. We all know people make mistakes. We are humans after all. So something is probably going to break down at some point, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But what you're trying to do is that what's on the left is actually reality.
When we first opened and developed our museum, we realized when we started tracing people's pathways through their experience that we often said one thing, but it didn't come to reality. We had a lot of gaps, or what we're going to later call hotspots. So we had gaps that we had to address. But we could do a whole session just on expectations. So then we started talking, okay, so Jacob shared with you what people expect in a normal world. We are now sharing what we think people expect in a COVID world. Now they expect they're going to come to your site and you're not going to make them sick. You're not going to put their life, their health, their family in jeopardy in any way whatsoever. That you're going to have this absolutely pristine, clean facility, and that they want to see that you're cleaning it. You know, we've all learned that you have to make that visible, and that you're going to keep everybody socially distanced. You know, people start to get mad when a crowd gets out of control or there aren't barriers. These are things that are starting to make people get uncomfortable. When they start getting uncomfortable, they start getting anxious and they start getting mad. They expect lots of great signage or control over the pathways that people visit to your museum. So these are all their expectations. While you're also, you know, they still expect you to give all the services and programs and activities that you normally would. So we are challenged. There's no doubt museums are challenged. And this does lead to some failures for sure. But the most important thing, and this is our third tip, is your communication needs to be very clear. As I said, we could do a whole program back on this. Both sets of expectations. What we did when we had Polar Express is we started, or any event, we started looking where we had hotspots, where we were making people mad. Now you can look at it, you know, as your regular programs or your COVID activities that you do, procedures and policies. where are the hot spots? Where are the patterns of behavior? For example, this is such a silly example, but people would get mad about our Polar Express elves because they expected that they were trained, highly costumed, paid actors. And the elves on the Polar Express are really school children who spend a tremendous amount of time training and making their own costumes, and they're creating their own name and their elf backgrounds. And when we started sharing in the literature, you know, our elves, very clear in our literature, you know what you're going to get when you come to Polar Express, down to the T. We've become pros at it, that you're going to see school kids. And guess what? No more people mad, nobody complaining, nobody sending me mean letters about our elves. So those are the kind of hot spots you want to watch for.
And another big hot spot that we talked about is the difference. So we have different types of levels of classes in Polar Express, so first class coach and everything like that. One of the other big hot spots was we had one particular train car that had couches in it. So it was very, very fancy. And all of the first class cars are very nice, but some have different types of seats. Some have tables, some don't. So that wasn't, sometimes when someone would come multiple times, they would have one car and then be placed in the next year, they'd be placed in a different car. So what we did is we changed the literature saying that you're not going to be guaranteed this, that, or the other if you're in first class coach or whatever. One thing you will have, however, is that if you're in first class, you are guaranteed this. If you are in coach, you're guaranteed this. So keeping that clear communication was very, very important.
And I would also say, don't ignore the hot spots. I mean, seriously, did I really want to have to spend so much time on explaining information about our elves? No. But it was such a situation that, you know, it made our life a whole lot easier when we started making that very clear to our customers.
Right, so the DI on the top left corner means something that we're taking from Disney Institute, and this is a direct quote actually from them. So you can have every system in place, every process is there. However, you have, at your organization, you have the absolute best possible service you can have. You have designed it to a T, everything down to the letter. However, there are times that we know reality happens. As always, if you remember in Forrest Gump, there's a particular word that comes before that, blank happens, with a little smiley face and everything. So it does happen. Reality does actually happen. When you have all these processes in place and then something goes wrong, that is when the next thing happens. People get angry. And like I said, it's going to happen. And it's even more apparent now with COVID. Everybody's more tense. Everybody's more on edge. So people tend to be a little more angry now than they used to be.
So what we're telling you in these tips is do everything you can to be proactive and prevent them from being angry. So then you don't have angry customers. But now we're going to ease into the part where, yeah, it's going to happen. A long time ago when I used to do train rides, there was a lady that I worked with who said to me, Wendy, there's always going to be somebody on this train who is mad. And it's nothing we've done. They've argued with their husband all the way here. Their kids are driving them crazy. We did nothing to make this person mad, but they're mad. And I sort of took that to heart. And I would always sort of find that person. And once I found that angry person and solved their problems, life went on great. But there's always going to be somebody who's mad.
So we were talking about hotspots. So then we started looking at what are going to be the COVID hotspots. So we kind of broke this down into a list of probably the top like 6 things that we thought about, and we're going to be focusing on 2 of them. But the first one is the medical non-mask wearers. Now, of course, there are people who will be coming to your site, and we have had it ourselves, that cannot wear a mask because of a medical reason. It could be asthma, it could be COPD, it could be a multitude of different things. So you do have that situation where there are people who do not wear masks because of medical reason. And of course, you're not allowed to ask either. The next one is people who don't want to distance. We all know people like to get up in everybody's business. So sometimes, you know, right now it's more important than ever to stay that 6 feet apart. I think it should be 10 feet apart. Most people you don't want to be that close to. But some people, and the way our museum is set up is we have train cars. Well, train cars are only 10 feet wide, which you would think would be wide enough, but remember you also have walls and you also have exhibits that make them even smaller. So sometimes you have people, some groups of people that don't want to distance to the other groups of people. We are a very interactive exhibit, or an interactive museum. We have lots of interactive exhibits. And so we have a lot of touch points, tons and tons and tons of touch points. Well, during COVID, you can't have as many touch points. So you still have people who are touching things and people who are not using the sanitation stations that we put out to the museum or using their gloves that we put in the kids' bags that we gave to them. So you have those people as well. People not following the rules, such as the signage. We have signage everywhere with our cute little Bing, which is our World War I hero mascot, and he has a mask on, and we have signs all through the museum. Stay on this side of the train car, stay on this side of the wing, stay 6 feet apart from people, make sure you have your mask on to the entire museum. People don't always listen to those things. The two that we really want to talk about, though, is this one, the museum's canceling events or changing the format, and then, of course, or communication. So let's talk about changing the format. We at our museum, we used to give out free coffee to everybody who walked through the museum. Because we were a canteen site, we still kind of keep that World War II mentality that anybody who walks through our doors can get a free cup of coffee and a free cookie in our lobby. Well, during COVID, we cannot do that because there's a lot of touch points there, and to be more sanitary, we had to take that away. Well, people weren't very happy about that. Which is and even the staff wasn't very happy about that, because sometimes when we need to pick me up in the afternoon, we need that coffee. But it made people mad, so we had to change the format there. Like I said before, we were talking about interactive things. Our museum is very, very interactive. We have an entire children's exhibit car that has a lot of space for touch points. We have buttons to press. We have places to sit. We have bunks to climb into. We have play food that they can make in the kitchen. So all of that we had to change. And again, we've had members who have come to the museum for 20 years with their kids and now their grandkids. And when we had to change the format where you couldn't touch as many things, that did not make people very happy. Talking also, one of our other sites, Schönbrunn Village, we had a lantern tour, one of the few events we were allowed to do.
Big event.
Very big event. Usually this event gets about 700 people per night. We had to change that format where we could only do 150 people per night. So instead of what we used to do is they would come into the main part of the visitor center, they'd get a lantern, they'd go out into the village, and they could roam freely. Well, during COVID, you can't have people butting up into each other, so we had to change it to 10 people max in a group. And that was a huge thing that did not make people happy, especially, again, people who had been coming to this event for a long time, who were very used to the way we had done it in the past. They were very upset by the new format. Because we had to pre-sell admission, that was something else that made people very angry, because we would sell out, and then if you came to the village and we were sold out for that time, they would have to wait, which made them angry, or you would have to, they'd have to not be able to go at all. We did have to turn people away, and everybody knows Facebook is gospel sometimes. So those are some examples.
So when we reopened to the public, we closed in March like everybody, and then we reopened in June. And Jacob mentioned this, but I just want to stress, when our staff was going through our museum and putting away all the touch points, our engineers' costumes, our food, the coffee cart, canteen cart, it really was hard for us. And so we really understood that it would be hard for our visitors who looked forward. One of the things we've been praised at all the time was our interactive activities. So when we really reviewed and discussed with our staff, where were people mad during COVID? Jacob has it right. It's these two last bullet points. I can say the only nasty letters that I have received and the only moment I was screamed at involved the cancellation of Polar Express and the change of the tours at Schönbrunn Village. It could have, what we need to think about is, did we not do a good job in our communication? Obviously, we should have been better, but still, we couldn't change the situation. But always, that's a hot spot for us. We're going to go back, hopefully never have to. Boy, I hope Polar's not canceled this year. I'm just going to head to Canada or somewhere. But, maybe we should have done a better job in our communication. So we're assuming now that people are made them mad. And how do you handle that? We spent a lot of time with Disney Institute, and it's not brain science here, but You have to let the customer speak. And I'll tell you what, in my early days as director, I know I would sort of not let them speak and be very defensive. But you really have to let them speak, stay attentive and calm, really have to hear what they're saying, and then also repeat it back to them. I hear what you were saying. You know, you really have to say, I understand why you're unhappy, and I hear what you're saying, and I acknowledge your feelings.
Which goes into our fifth tip, is acknowledging their feelings. So the first thing you got to do with acknowledging their feelings is showing empathy. And this comes directly from Disney Institute, is that you have to understand that something went wrong. And that and when Wendy was talking about when they said, hear what they're saying, repeating back to them, understanding exactly what they're saying, because a lot of times you'll sit there and you'll listen and you'll listen and you'll listen, but you're really not actually listening. You're just hearing their words, but you're not actually understanding what they're telling you. And people can tell that. People know if you're being sincere or not when it comes to that. And you can always call for help if needed. Other people are better at kind of delineating, diffusing the situation than others. But what's important is I want to show this picture is extremely important, because if you can see, this is a picture at Disney. You can see the little castle behind them. And this is the way we used to be able to talk to people. We used to be able to give them high fives. We used to be able to get really close to them. Now we have to do this. I always talk about, you know, that's the new COVID hug, is the elbow touch. But more importantly than ever, right now, and as you can see, it's bolded and huge on the screen, is show empathy. It is absolutely, it's actually most important. So this is where we were on this screen. This is where we are now. Go back one more time, because I really want to drive this point home, that this is where we were allowed to be. Now we have to be somewhere else. And who knows if it's ever going to go back to the way the first one was. We don't know. We hope that it's going to go away eventually, but we all know that most of the cleaning situations, the cleaning procedures that we have done and started, they're going to have to continue. How long that continues, we're not sure. So moving on to number 6. And again, this comes from Disney. You know, we're really talking about humanizing the customers. Remember, the people who come to your site and the people who come to visit your museums or your historic home, whatever, they are people. So in the old days, we talked about put yourself in their shoes, that if you were at a place, and we all know when you go to a place, we've all had bad experiences and we've all had good experiences. So when you've had those bad experiences, remember how you felt when you were at that site. So try to understand, they've made sacrifices to come to you, more than they could have chosen any other place they could go, but they still chose your site. The money they spent, some places are expensive. Most of you have admission fees. They chose to spend their hard-earned money by coming to you. Sometimes they bring large groups, and that's sometimes hard to do. Scheduling everybody, especially with kids, if they have sports schedules, they have to work around all those schedules, and they still chose you. Sometimes they go and they use their vacation time to see you. So that's all very important. But now, during COVID, this is extremely important. More than ever, we have to think of our customers as those human beings, because this might be the first time they've ever left the house in months, and they still chose your site. Because we were talking, Wendy had actually shared a great article on LinkedIn the other day about how museums are one of the safest places for visitors to come, because we do have some touch points, but most of our museums have great ventilation systems, better than probably most regular buildings. A lot of our places are outside. Historic sites, for example, are outside. And museums know how to clean. I would say we're better at cleaning than probably other organizations, so we know how to do it. So you have to remember also, and this is extremely important, that with this disease, someone may have lost a family member, but they're still coming to your site. Someone may have lost their job, and they're still spending money to come to your site. Some people may have gotten COVID. I got COVID. It was not fun. And so they were very, very sick. So you have to remember now, on top of everything else, that they were humans before. We need to have more humanity now than we've ever had before. And then the last thing on this thing, one of my favorite things, is that they could have done anything else in the world. They could have gone any other place and they still picked you over everything else. Always remember that.
Yeah, we make sure that our frontline, our experience coordinators are always, thanking them for coming. As Jacob said, a lot of choices in the world, but they came to see you or came to your event or saved money for their Polar Express or whatever your event is. A lot of this is a mindset, and truly you need to make sure that your staff and your volunteers have this mindset of how to handle customers correctly. We knew at one point we realized we were spending a lot of time, back of the house museum, curators and different folks on training, and we weren't spending enough training on the front line. So we changed our frontline people to experienced coordinators because it's entirely their job to coordinate and manage and engineer the experience out front to be a good one. In addition to Disney, one of our favorite inspirations comes from Starbucks. And we really, really like this theory that they use, and we hammer this home to our experience coordinators all the time, that Starbucks, they in fact probably serve more than 1 million cups of coffee, but they don't look at it that way. They look at it as serving 1 cup of coffee, one at a time, to one customer 1 million times over. So every day, it's important to create magical moments for that person out front, whether it's a veteran, a family, doesn't matter. Every person is addressed one-on-one. And of course, now during COVID, we also have to think about all those concerns and make sure we're taking care of their COVID concerns as well. So we've done everything we can to make them not angry, but they become angry. We need to understand how that happened, and we need to apologize. And one of the things Disney Institute told us and taught us is that people don't like to apologize. They don't like to say they're wrong. And the thing is, it might not be your fault, might not have anything to do with you, but you've got to be accountable and take it and deal with it and apologize and move on and go into recovery. Recovery is a whole thing in itself. It's a big Disney term. Hopefully you all know about it. So now you have to recover the situation from a bad situation. And Disney Institute's definition of that is a company's resolution of a problem from a dissatisfied customer. So you got this really mad person. How do you change them? What action do you take to convert them back into a loyal customer? Because there's an opportunity here.
So you have tools, and you probably don't even realize that you have them, but your number one recovery tool is to empower your staff or your volunteers to go into recovery. So once you've broken down, so we kind of started, like Wendy said, we started with where you had this people, you're trying not to make people angry, but it's already happened. So then you listen to their problem and then you apologize. And then now we're into the next step, which is that recovery. Using our recovery tools, empowering your staff and volunteers to go into that recovery is extremely important, because a lot of times when people start getting very mad and very angry, people start to shrink back or they get very defensive. So you want to empower your staff and your volunteers that they can do recovery just as much as you can.
Immediately. They don't need to wait on me or Jacob.
Yes. One of the greatest things to do and one of the best things to do is offer alternative experiences to make amends. I will talk about how that can go wrong if you do it wrong, but you can offer that, say tickets for another event or another train ride, for in our case, or come back another day, things like that you can always do. And then of course, all of your assets, big and small, are tools. One of my favorites is that during a tour, we had a tour guide who was doing his tour, and then one of the members of the tour started she started to cough a lot. We're not sure exactly why she was coughing, but what he did, he was able to get a bottle of water for them. Something very simple, something you can do. Didn't stop the tour, was able to make a phone call, quick I don't know if it was a phone call or text, and we brought a water bottle to that person. Absolutely simple. And you may not think of that as a recovery thing, but it is.
If your staff is afraid to grab a free bottle of water, out of a gift shop and give it free, then that's a problem.
Yeah. You can also give free tickets to things. You can also do a photograph. So you can take a photograph for people, or you can post it for them, or you can also do a VIP experience. We've done that several times in the past. However, there are times where it goes wrong. So Disney has this thing called don't give out fruit baskets. And what that means is That when something goes wrong, it's like, here, have a fruit basket. Here, have a fruit basket.
Which
like,
is not sincere.
It's not sincere at all. It means that you don't really care. The only thing you're doing is just trying to alleviate the situation and then move on. That's not it at all. My experience once was with the pie. And so this is the number 2 option to alter alternative experiences. So I have a gluten allergy, and I was at a restaurant and I had gotten an omelet. And I'm not going to say which chain of restaurant it was, because I don't want to put them on or put anything bad about them, but I was at the restaurant and I got an omelet. Should have been normal. We all know what's in an omelet. And when I took a bite into it, I tasted pancake batter. Pancake batter should not be in an omelet. And because I have a gluten allergy, I could have gotten very sick from it. So I spoke, I told our waitress, and then the manager came over and apologized, and that was great. But what he offered instead, and when I had mentioned that I had a gluten allergy, he said, well, how about a piece of pie? That does not work for me because I still can't have it. So it's not going to do me any good. So it was kind of like a fruit basket idea that here it is, but it's still not going to do you any good. So you have to be sincere when you are apologizing and when you're going into that recovery.
Yeah, the pie was an insult on top of an insult. He was listening, but he was not hearing.
Yes.
And his actions clearly showed that. So here's something we want to share from Disney Institute. This is really important, that recovery is an important part of strategically thinking about service. So, we try to swim upstream, handle the hot spots, fix all those problems so nothing goes wrong. But when they do, we have to have a strategic plan in place so that people can handle it, and be very intentional and how you design your visitor experience from beginning to end.
And of course, look for those unhappy spots, those hot spots. And during that time of COVID, the thing that we saw the most, again, like we had talked about before, was those changes in formats or canceling events. That really was probably the one that made people the most angry, or at least from what we understood. And so we had already kind of talked about the children's car, but that was probably, again, one of the biggest things, is that people are so used to it being interactive. And even on our website, it says the interactive children's exhibit car, and now you can't be as interactive anymore because of COVID. So that is something that made people very upset.
Okay, so this is one you want to really write down. Another Disney Institute tidbit, that customers will be substantially more frustrated by your organization's inability to fix a problem than they are by the problem itself. If you fix it and move on and do, go above and beyond and do something even more than they expected, you have just gotten a true fan. But if you ignore it or do nothing, they're going to remember this forever. That affects their memory bank account. They're going to talk about it to everybody, so it becomes even worse. And what you want to avoid is making it worse. So sorry is not the end. We talked about that. We talked about the tip that you're going to apologize, but as we said, just to sum it up again, the opportunity to differentiate yourself, to stand out. We don't want to be good anymore. We want to be great. Everybody's good. At the Dennison Depot and our museums, we want to stand out and be remarkable. So use that problem. I was in a session yesterday. There's this new ice house program for entrepreneurs, which I'm doing. And in that session, they were raving about problems and failures because that gave them new ideas to do new things. So look at it as a problem, definitely as an opportunity to do something and take someone's visit to the next level.
Yeah, it's a great example because we talk about, as Wendy said, we want to be great. Good is no longer good enough anymore. And, when you think about situations that you have had personally, I want everyone to kind of think about their worst experience that they've had at an organization, their best experience. Those probably stick in your mind very well. But can you remember average experiences? Just okay experiences, good experiences? Probably not as much. They don't come to your mind as much. You remember the good things, and you remember the great things, and you remember the very bad things. So think about that when you're kind of doing your service and recovery models. This is one of my favorite quotes of all time. This is by Seth Godin. This is from The Purple Cow. And The Purple Cow is it's a pretty simple kind of concept. So say you're traveling with your family in the car on a road trip, and you're going through the fields, and then you spot a cow, and it's like, oh my goodness, it's so cool to see a cow. In Ohio, we see lots of cows. When you're a kid, it's like so exciting to see one, because maybe you don't see one all the time. And then you keep going and you see more cows and more cows and more cows, and finally, you're just kind of like, cows, whatever. But what if you're driving along, and you've seen all these cows, and then suddenly you see a purple cow? Does that stand out? Of course it does. So what you're trying to be is a purple cow. And this is a really great quote in the book that he talks about, is that most of the time your competition, other museums, other historic sites, spend their day looking forward to those rare moments when everything goes right. But think about this for a second. Flip it on its head and imagine if you looked at the times when it doesn't go right and you engineer those experiences and those problems and you fix them. You're going to be way ahead of the class in that kind of experience. So when things go wrong, you should be thinking about those. As Wendy's already said, that's why we looked at those hot spots. We went into proactive mode. We wanted to fix those things instead of always looking at what goes right.
Okay, so if you're a reader, go get this book. It is like the best book. We just did a strategic planning session, and it was all themed on creating magical moments. You engineer your moments. Okay, there are some natural ones, but if you are not engineering moments at your museum, you need to do it now. So we started out by pre-strategic planning homework, and asked my staff to make lists of magical moments. I never had any idea it was going to be that hard to actually identify a magical moment. So they would put down things like an elf from the North Pole. An elf from the North Pole is not a magical moment. Meeting one of Santa's elves for the very first time and getting to know Coco, and that he's 200 years old and that he has magical elf glitter that's going to connect you right to Santa. Now that's a moment. So, it was really sort of hard work to get them to understand moments. This book tells you about how to engineer moments and why they're important and what people remember. They'll rattle off 5 moments and tell you which moments a person visiting Disney World will remember. So whether you're talking about fixing your overall operation or situations that involve COVID so they go smoothly, this book will really help you. So I highly recommend it. And of course, we're big fans of engineering moments, identifying moments, creating moments, looking for moments that exist, and enhancing them. That's another thing. What are the best moments in your museum? Ask yourself, what's the best 5 moments for our people who visit our museum? Can they identify them? Well, let's take those 5 and let's enhance them. And they can also be operational. So here's a funny thing. A moment we added for membership is that we have members for years, and when they died, we never sent them a sympathy card. So we added that. But then we started realizing, okay, you have to get, you get your membership cards and all that regular stuff, renewals. They have to wait to the end to get a sympathy card. How about we send them a note in the beginning? So what we've done now is we have a list of new or renewing members, and anybody on the staff who knows that person will write a personal note, creating that moment of purchase or that moment of renewal into a special moment for them by sending them a handwritten welcome note. So it can be as operational as buying a membership. It doesn't have to be, an event. But what people remember, and I have this on the wall in my office, is that our lives are measured in moments. People remember moments, they do not remember days. They remember moments, and a moment can change your life. So it can, and really, you'll see our top 10 didn't change a lot from being COVID or non-COVID. It's just how you handle that whole overall experience, and whether they're mad about regular stuff or COVID situations, you're still going to handle it the same.
So, because we like to exceed expectations, we give you an extra one. This is one of my favorite ones, is that you can always break your own rules. Go off script. One of my favorite stories is actually Polar Express. I love to talk about Polar because it is probably my favorite event that we do. It is the absolute most magical experience that you can have when you see a kid face light up when Santa walks in the car. Oh, it's fantastic. One of the things we did is we have a script for Polar. We have an absolutely wonderful script for Polar that we had to engineer and we had to create. And we have storytellers in every car that kind of reads the story and does all that stuff. But because I like to be a little flashy, I decided to add some things to my Polar script. And one of the things we did is we have this part in the beginning of the ride, we play a broken bell. We actually took the middle part out so they can't hear it, because if you're familiar with the story of Polar Express, the little boy does not believe in the beginning, and then by the end of the story, he does. So so what we do is we play the broken bell. Nobody on the passengers can hear it because they need some magic. So we do all these things. We read the book, we have the hot chocolate, we see Santa, we see the North Pole, all that happens. And at the end, what we do is we get another bell, and then we find a kid. I say I lost my bell, and I find a kid, and the kid brings me the bell. And it is the absolute most magical experience, because usually we pick somebody who's like very little, and they bring me the bell. And then when I walk through, I ring the bell, and everybody can hear it again. So, and on top of that, what I did is, before we even had that, we added a song, which, again, if you're familiar with the movie, the suite of the Polar Express is beautiful. And listening to it even now gets me like teared up, like chokes me up, because it's so good. So what I did is I added that song to that part, and it just is so magical. And again, going off script, breaking our own rules made so much of a difference. So,
and don't forget the senses. When you're engineering the music, the most powerful sense is sound, correct?
Smell. Smell is the most powerful. Smell and sound.
So use those. I just wanted to as we're closing up here, mention that Polar Express, again, was canceled. 42% of people carried their tickets over, which is a huge confirmation for us that people trust us, that they know they're going to get the same experience next year, so they want to save the order of their tickets and their reservations. But that presented us a whole new opportunity to do a new initiative. So between now and next December, we're going to be doing all kinds of fun things, like what is Santa doing now in July, and hashtag Santa's our BFF. And we're just going to do a lot of connecting activities for those people who kept their tickets to keep the interest alive, and just, what are the elves doing today? What are the reindeer doing in May? So we connect that, keep it alive, gives a whole new opportunity between now and December. And another last experience I want to share that Jacob and I measure. We have in our museum what we call sort of our Indiana Jones treasure case that holds one of our sandwich bags to our canteen. And that's where we tell the story of Dreamsville and the whole importance of a serviceman's canteen, and that's what made us a National Historic Landmark. But we tell our staff, when you tell that story, you need to bring people to tears, and we can do it almost every time. And that's a measure that you're telling the story correctly, creating that experience, being a great storyteller, and that kind of stuff.
Great. And so, of course, there's Tinkerbell, who makes magic all the time. So we have, I think, Betsy, am I correct? We have about 5-6 minutes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So, questions.
So plenty of time for plenty of time for questions. And if folks have questions, either put them in the chat. I don't see anything in the chat so far, but or go ahead and unmute and ask them.
I'm just going to stop sharing this. So maybe we just did such a great job. There's no questions. That's okay. It's a beautiful Saturday.
Yeah, this is not the moment to share a personal experience, but I'll fill in the silence anyway. And there is the moment when a local chain donut shop, who I will not name because it's not fair to them, really, they were having a bad day and I was having a bad day, and I was visibly annoyed, although in no way impolite or screaming, I'm pretty sure, and I was kicked out. Yeah. It was pretty much, I was like, so yeah, I know. I was trying to get stuff for a board meeting, not one of the Alliance board meetings, but a different board meeting. And I ordered one of the coffee totes, and they said, well, that's going to take about 20 minutes. And I'm like, I know. I tried to call ahead, but you weren't answering your phone. Now, if they had said, we're really sorry, it's been super busy this morning, we'll get to that as fast as we can. Like, I would have been like, but the manager went straight to, I'm sorry, I'm going to need you to leave. And I was like, what?
Oh my God.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is an example of not doing it correctly.
Yeah. I don't think we ever actually kicked anybody out.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Yeah.
I was and remain flabbergasted. It's not quite as egregious as the pie story. Although in fairness to that manager, there are people who don't know what gluten is. Although
Sure.
people who don't know what gluten is should not be working in food services.
That was exactly my point, Betsy. I was like, you work in a restaurant and you don't know the gluten thing? Okay. But.
Wendy and Jacob, that was really fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ben.
A little bit about how long it, I mean, this all didn't happen overnight. So I think for folks working in other organizations, like over how many years has it taken for you to really refine and like bring things to the place? And how much longer do you feel like you have before you have sort of those magical moments, permeating every single part of your organizations, or have you sort of achieved that moment? But I think just giving people a sense of how long and over how many years you've been working on this helps people.
Well, I've been there over 30 years. Jacob, you've been there, is it 5, 7, 8? I don't know, 8 years. So we do 2 strategic plannings a year to just, it's constant retraining of people. And as people change, we have a strong habit of getting college interns and hiring them for a while, and then they leave. We're just constantly redoing it over. You have to be vigilant. You have to work against what we call negative incrementalization, where all of a sudden little things happen that they shouldn't, and then it snowballs into bigger problems. So I don't think you're ever done, because people change, and with COVID, things change. It's just constant, vigilant, never-ending battle.
I agree. That's to add to Wendy's comment, Ben, you asked if we've kind of hit that sweet spot. I think we've hit a sweet spot, definitely, but we always talk about how we can make things better. We have a constant kind of culture of raising the bar. So we have, we can always, no matter what it is, there's always a way to make it better. There's always a way to make it more seamless. So we try to look at those things that even if they work, there's a better way to do it.
We do. One thing we stole from Disney is a leadership walk, where we'll go to our different sites and walk through. And then we realized that, oh, here comes Wendy, it would make them nervous. So we started making all staff take turns in leadership walks, and they could write down, what looked good, what needed work. So it was more inclusive of everybody, not just the boss telling everybody what they were doing wrong. So, but that has worked really well, and doing it at different times, because you just, summer gets busy, you just got to keep up with things.
Yeah.
It makes everybody accountable.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Thank you for that.
I have a question.
Andy, about to do your
I'm the only employee.
Don't sing again.
Yeah, you better be careful what I'll sing. I got a guitar right here. I'm not afraid to use it. So I'm the only employee at the XYZ Historical Society. I clean the toilets, I give tours, I shovel the snow, I process the collections. And we have a board, and they're wonderful, but that's why they pay me. Okay, so I want to create magic moments. How can I begin to do that?
I'm gonna tell you, a clean toilet's a magic moment when you walk in. How many times have we walked into a place and it's not clean? I'm just gonna say.
I agree. I agree.
Well, and we always talk about using unused spaces. So one of the things we talk about, speaking of bathrooms, is that when you walk into the depot's restrooms, the walls in the women's restroom are Tiffany blue. So it looks like, since we're really focused on the 1940s, it looks like a dressing room for movie stars. So something that's an unused space that we don't normally think about, you can use to your advantage in the men's
create a moment.
to create a moment. So people always comment, "Oh, I love this color of blue." And then people recognize the Tiffany blue color, like they know that color. In the men's restroom, we have a lot of military kind of paraphernalia. So
here's an example for you. So we get a lot of veterans. okay, take your admission off, you get the normal spiel, off you go. We started creating a program called Veteran in the House, just to, kick it up a notch. So now that you're a veteran, we immediately thank you for your service. We offer a big red, white, and blue pin. Doesn't cost. One person can do this. You give them the pin, you put their name on it, you thank them, you ask them, can I take your picture and put it on Facebook? And 9 times out of 10, they say yes. Now this veteran might be with a grandchild or a son or somebody, and it's a moment of, there's a lot of moments. There's moments of pride, moments of connection. So you start doing this moment of pride. You start connecting their kids to what their grandfather did. One person can do this. What we do is somebody gets on the intercom and says there's a veteran in the house, so that as they go through the museum or we walk past them, we all stop and thank this veteran. But one person could do that easily.
Okay. I'm just thinking of those organizations that only have one staff member, and volunteers that help. I'm not saying they're the only person ever, but I'm just trying to think of that lone professional, how they can, and I can see how you can scale some of these things to do that. Just
I think
you had something in mind.
The starting point is just say, sitting back and what do people talk about as the best moments? Where do they enjoy something? And look at those. You probably already have moments. They could be bad or they could be good, but you probably, I think all sites already have moments. Think about them and how you draw more attention to them, make them better, or you fix the bad moments. The pits and the peaks, you got to fix them all.
Yeah. Thank you.
I have a question. Mine's related to an artifact. We just recently updated our Norculi stone display, and it's very controversial. We decided, it's for 20 plus years, it's been completely neutral. So we decided to take a stand, and we're going with the science. So last year, of course, we didn't have a lot of the Church of Latter-day Saints in. They travel from out west. They come by the bus and to see these stones because they believe that they relate to the Mormon faith. So this summer we're expecting to have these people come, and I know they're going to be upset with the exhibit, and I am really nervous about that first interaction when they see the display and it's science-based. So any thoughts that you have that I can, for me, and also I
look at Jacob because he just did a controversial exhibit and included things like Ku Klux Klan and Nazi flags and things like that.
Yeah, so one of the things we did in the exhibit is be very transparent, be absolutely transparent, be 100% honest with people. The thing is that people are going to be mad about something. They're going to see something that they're not going to like. I mean, you'd be surprised, especially because we are a World War II museum. We do have Nazi memorabilia. And a funny story about that, Wendy can tell you later, about a Nazi flag we are getting. But, when we did that exhibit, we did have people who were some of our board was very cautious about what we were going to do with that. And to me, you can't hide the history. You can't hide the interpretation. Since you are taking a stand on what it is, I mean, that is your stand. I mean, you're just going to have to say that this is the way we interpret it. And I mean, maybe you could do both interpretations, have both of them there, because it's probably good for that. Because that's what we did too. Because we had the Nazi flag we had on display was. It was a huge one that was taken from the Battle of the Bulge. It had lots of the signatures from the Thunderbolt Division, which was a group from Dennison and Yorksville. And it was cut down because, when you win a battle, you steal the other person's flag, right? Well, that's an object that has two interpretations. One is, of course, the symbol of hate, which most people automatically assume with the swastika, the Nazi flag. But there's this other kind of layer that there is this kind of symbol of victory, that this was a symbol of victory, that this was cut down, this was a symbol of pride for the men of that division. So how do you interpret both? You do interpret both. You say that it is both things. and people have their kind of opinions on it.
We made it a place where people could really think. It was a very simple in number of artifacts, and there were Post-its that you could share your thoughts, which we had to monitor all the Post-its all the time. And interestingly enough, just the other day, so this was at least 2 years ago, I got a gentleman on the phone, called me and said, hey, I remember your exhibit from 2 years ago. My neighbor has a Nazi flag and she's going to burn it. Do you want it? So it was sort of funny that it was so memorable that he was trying to save this flag. We worked with OHC because they had done a controversial exhibit before us, so we got a lot of good advice from them. If you want to talk to Jacob, it is a little bit about how setting the tone before they see it. It was really important in that exhibit that we set the tone, and where we put 3 flags. It was 3 or 2. We put an American flag, you know, and different Japanese flag and a Confederate flag. We couldn't put that Nazi flag right up in the front. We wanted to set the tone that really they're pieces of fabric. That's all they are, pieces of fabric. But they mean different things to different people. So before they got to the Nazi flag and the Ku Klux Klan, we had already done a lot of work explaining what we're doing in this exhibit. So, hope that helps.
Yeah.
Well, we have, so we have a like an iPad kiosk, and it goes through, you know, where the stones were found and who found them, and then it goes into the details of why they were found, why this group believes that they were found, and why archaeologists believe they were found. So we do touch on both sides, but we are definitely, like, we're taking a stand. This is the archaeological evidence. This is what the science shows us. So, I mean, I guess that's just, I guess that's just where we need to, you know, this is what the evidence shows. Like, this is how.
And prepare your staff. Prepare
Yeah.
your staff. We actually had, I think, one person get mad and leave, storm out and say something.
Yeah.
They said we should shut
Shut
down the
down.
entire museum because of the artifacts that were in this exhibit.
Yeah, we've received over the years calls like telling us all that we're going to hell because we display these in the wrong. So it's like it's great fun.
I know. Yeah. Now we really want to see them.
We're intrigued. We gotta
Come on down. But yeah, I know that once these groups start coming back, that it's gonna be fun.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole backstory and complication with the New York Holy Stones. So that's I expect this is a moment for start by hearing their point of view, and then, you know, but not necessarily accepting it sort of process. So thank you to Wendy and Jacob and all of our presenters. Now is the moment when we will tour the historic site. Hang on, and Bailey, you can go ahead and stop recording.